never even seen of an advanced trolling pass. It's either done right or it's done wrong. So it's always good to get back to the basics, whether you're a beginner or whether you've been doing it for 20 or 30 years. There's really no other way to do it except for the basics. So let's go ahead and get started. At some time or another, a fish can be caught by most anyone, most any place, on most anything, and by most any method. That's a fishing fact. If you and I expect to catch more and bigger fish, we must spend our time where we have the best chance to catch a fish. That's pretty simple. If you and I expect to catch more and bigger fish consistently, we must be at the right place at the right time, fishing in the right manner. It's all real simple, and basically I don't have to say too much more. Spoon plugging, what is it? It's understanding what makes a fish tick and how to go about catching him, how to go about putting him on a stringer. It's just that simple. We're going to fish for the largemouth bass because he is the most difficult fish to catch. If you can catch a largemouth bass, then you can catch all the other fish on that screen. He reacts to the weather and water conditions in such a way that it makes him the most difficult fish to catch. So we're going to base all our studies on the largemouth bass. The spoon pluggers are different than all the other fishermen. We fish for the big fish. Always fish for the bigger fish. We don't fish for the little tournament bass and the little stinkers. That makes us different from anybody else. And right there is what it's all about. Getting into a school of big fish and getting into them on the cast. Locate them on the troll, get into them on the cast, where every cast you got a great big fish coming in, and that's what spoon plugging is all about. If you haven't done that yet, Mr. Perry says you haven't got your diploma. And that's what it's all about right there. And them are big old fish. I'll go back. Mr. Perry caught a big school of fish, and Terry O'Malley caught them out of this lake that we fished. And it was about 30 years ago, and we went back to it, and nothing's changed. They was on the exact same spot that those guys caught them. So nothing's changed in 30 years. Most people go to a lake and they'll look out there and they're just scared to death. They have no idea where to start. You don't want to let that bother you. All lakes are the same, no matter how big they are, how small they are. You go about them, every one of them the same way. As you get into your studies, you'll find out that they're all the same, and pretty soon you won't be scared of nothing. You just go out there and you fish them all the same way, no matter if it's a 50-acre lake or a 10,000-acre lake. They're all the same. Fish are either in the shallows, the deep, or somewhere in between. And the way you go about your fishing, the guidelines that Mr. Perry gives you, you'll have no problems. We're going to separate the water into two categories, the shallows and the deep. Anything shallower than 8 to 10 feet, we're going to consider the shallows. Anything deeper than 8 to 10 feet, we're going to call deep water. The fish react a little bit different in the shallows than they do in the deep water. That's why we need to separate that. We'll find that out a little later. Where is the home of the fish? I'm not sure about why those fish are where they are, but they should be somewhere a little deeper than that. I didn't quite understand this slide, but the next one here shows the fish in the deepest water, close to the deepest water. You might say, how deep? Under the average weather conditions, it will be 30 to 35 feet. That's the average weather conditions. It could be deeper. But Mr. Perry says if they have 20 feet or deeper available, they'll always pick 20 feet or deeper. But the average sanctuary on average weather conditions around 30 to 35 feet. If it's a reservoir, the home of the fish should be in the channel, somewhere in the channel. If it's a natural lake, it'll be somewhere in a slot or a hole. It's pretty simple. That's an easy guideline to remember. We need to say something about if the sanctuary is not, let's say it only has 18 foot of water. On a bad weather condition, those fish cannot get away. They cannot find a more stable environment. So they become extremely dormant when they don't have 30, 35 feet of water to get away from an unstable condition. So you might say that, well, I can put a lure down there right on top of them. Well, those fish don't have 30, 35 feet of water. If they don't have a stable environment to get back to, then those fish are going to get so dormant, so inactive that you're going to have trouble catching them. Those fish are in trouble and you're going to be in trouble. But if they have 30, 35 feet of water, they're going to be much, much safer, and everything's going to be better. Let's put the fish in the sanctuary depth, 30, 35 feet, and let's move them up on this bar here. A bar is going to be your number one structure situation you're going to run into. You're going to find them everywhere. That's going to be your number one structure situation. So let's get the weather conditions better, and let's move them up on the bar and see how they move. This is the basic movements of the fish. I said that already. This is a rocky bar. This is a long, narrow bar, leads out to the channel. So let's start moving them up. Move up on the end of the bar. The little fish will be ahead of them. They'll move towards the shallows. When the big ones get active and start moving up on the bar, the little ones will go to the shallows. They're safe there. They know they won't get ate there. But these fish are big fish. You see them little tight school down there. The bigger the fish are, the tighter they school in deep water. When they become active, they'll move up on the structure situations, and the little fish move shallower, and that's the way it works. So let's move them right up. When they move up to 8 to 10 feet, the little fish have moved up in the shallows and scattered out. They know they're going to be safe there. The bigger fish, when they get to about 8 to 10 feet, fish 2.5 pounds on up to 5 3/4 pounds. When they get to 8 to 10 feet, they're going to stop. They're going to say, whoa, this is too shallow. This is a little bit too shallow. We got to stop here. So that's normally as far as the big fish are ever going to come over the season, except for the spawning season. After the spawning season, this is about as shallow as they're ever going to come. And this doesn't happen very often. This will have to get a perfect weather condition in order for this to happen. So the big fish move up there and they stop. You see the little fish moved on into the shallows. This is the same view, only it's just a side view to give you a different idea. This becomes known as a hot spot. When this happens, the guy fishing the shoreline or the weeds or 5 feet from the bank, he's going to catch some little fish, and he might even catch a big fish that moves up there, but he's only going to catch 1 or 2 maybe. He's going to miss out on the school sitting out there at the 8 or 10 foot break line. This is going to be known as a hot spot. It's not a hot spot because of the weeds that might exist in the shallows or a stick up that might exist. It's a hot spot because the structure situation just happens to lead the fish to that spot. If you take that bar away from there, you take those break lines off of that bar, or you take that deep water away from that bar, those fish are not going to use that spot. A structure situation must run all the way to the deep as well as all the way to the shallows. It must go all the way to the shallows. So you must have all 3 of those. You must have deep water, you have to have a structure situation that must lead all the way to the shallows for the fish to use it. And then they move back down when the movement's over. It could last, well, let's talk this way. It's not a matter of hours, it's a matter of minutes. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, but never expect it to last longer than about 30, 40 minutes. That's the best movement you're ever going to get. So you have to have enough knowledge and you have to be ready when those fish move and you start catching them to know what to do to catch those fish in that 15 minutes of time you got. You have to be ready. We have to talk about a weed line a little bit. especially for the guys around our area. The weed line will tell you a lot about a lake. It'll tell you where the steep shorelines are, it'll tell you where the long bars are. It'll pretty much, you can see where the channel runs. I didn't bring a stick with me. You can see the channel come along here, turns. This is steep and deep. This is flat. Over there's no weeds up on top. That's going to be steep and deep. Nice bar running out here and here. The weed line is going to tell you an awful lot about the lake, so it's important. There's a side view of a weed line. You have to know about how fish use the weeds. So let's move some fish up along the weeds and see how we're going to do it. There's a fish in the sanctuary depth, and let's move them up to the weed line. The little fish are going to move ahead of the big fish. Are going to move up into the weeds to get away from them. The big fish, we're not messing around. We're moving. This is a full movement of big fish. They're going to move to the base break line, which is the base of the weed line, and then most of them are going to stop right there. They may move up and down along it, but they're going to stop right there. The little ones are going to scoot up in the shallows, and one or two big ones might stick their heads in the weeds. But when you fish a weed line situation like that, you don't go up and just start casting blind up into the weeds like that. You want to fish the edge of the weeds. That's the bottom break line of the weeds. You might want to stack your lures up, but you don't want to get back up in the weeds and fish blind. There's a top view of it. When they move up to the weed line, the big ones are on the outside. The little ones have scattered up into the weeds. Just like before, only now we got a weed line situation. It doesn't change anything. This becomes known as a hot spot, not because of the weed, but because of the structure situation just happens to lead the fish to that spot. No other reason. This might be a Florida lake that's all filled with weeds. It could be pads. It could be anything, but you'll have a couple open areas. You see the fish are on the little fingers out there. When they're not active, if they don't have any deep water, they'll go up underneath the weeds. They're going to be hard to catch, but when they become active, they're going to come out to the edge. They're going to be on the fingers. They're going to be on the outside. They're going to be catchable. They're going to be on the outside. Then they move back to the sanctuary. Look at this. We got something in common in all of these. When the fish become active, they're going to come to the outside. They're going to come to the outside. Okay. But when they do that, they're going to be catchable. And you're going to be right there. So the home of the fish is in deep water. We've got to talk about weather and water a little bit. The good, the bad, the present, and the seasonal. We have to talk about watercolors. We need to know which ones are the best and then which ones are the worst. Which ones are the toughest. Number 1 is a clear water. Number 2 is a yellow-green. Number 3 is white sandy. Number 4 is a red sandy. Number 5 is a cypress or a tannic acid color. We need to know which ones are the best and which ones are the worst in order. The number 1 and the number 2 you're going to find in a natural lake area up where we live in Indiana. The number 3 is a white sandy. You're going to find them in mostly reservoirs, not very many natural lakes. Number 4 will be in the south in the reservoirs where you got a lot of red clay. Number 5 is find some in Indiana, not too many. Some in Florida. But to rate them as far as the best to the worst, number 3, the white sandy, is the best. Number 4 is the red sandy, is the next. Number 2, which is yellow-green, is the next. Number 1, which is clear, is the next. And the number 5, which is cypress, is the worst. Mr. Perry had the 5 and the 1, the cypress and the clear, switched around when wireline came along and the bigger lures and he got people to fish in deeper water. Then that helps take care of the clear lakes. If you fish the deeper break lines, you can get down there and catch the fish. There's variations of each one of these different watercolors. You might go to a number one, a clear lake, and you might be able to see 15 or 20 feet down in the spring. And then you'll get an algae bloom in the summer. The algae starts growing, you might only be able to see 3 feet down. So that's when you move in and fish that lake, when it gets a little bit of color. Whenever you hear about a lake getting dark, that's when you want to move in and fish it. Because it can be clear most of the season, and you get a good algae bloom, you better get in there and fish it. But the 3 is the best, the white sandy, 4, the red, number 2, the yellow green is the next, number 1, the clear, number 5 is the worst. And this is the most important observation you can make in your fishing, is choosing the right lakes with the best watercolor. It's the most important thing you can do in your fishing. Don't ever forget that. That's the most important thing. There's a yellow green, that's kind of a light yellow green. Okay, we have to talk a little about the weather. The more you get into spoon plugging, the more you study, the more you fish, you're going to have to learn something about the weather and the way the fish move with the weather conditions. We need a guideline to go by, so we're gonna use a cold front as our basic guideline. We're gonna start at 0. The worst weather condition after a front comes through, when it's bright and clear, we're gonna call that 0, and then we're gonna watch things get better from there. So we're gonna use a cold front as our guide. That's a pretty bad one. That's an ice storm. This is what you're going to see the day after a cold front. Bright, clear skies. Not much upstairs at all. It's going to be bright and clear. That's the moon. So those are the kind of days that if you got a lawnmower, you need to use it. But these kind of days will teach you more about fishing than any other days. If you've got a chance to go fishing on this kind of a day, you better go, because you'll learn an awful lot on these kind of days also. Usually there's a lot of wind, which doesn't make it too much fun. Okay. Gotta figure out what's coming next. After a cold front, on a really bad weather condition, you see the fish are no longer in the sanctuary depth, 30, 35 feet. They're clear out there. If that's 60 feet, we'll say it's 60 feet. They're in 60 feet of water now. So we're going to have to, let's see what happens after 2 or 3 days of stable weather after the front goes through. Right now the fish, you could say they'd go to China if they could. They're no longer at 30, 35 feet. This is what you usually see a day or 2 after the cold front. You see these snowball clouds. Not much upstairs at all. You just got the snowballs. That's cold front conditions. Let's say that was the first or second day after the front. It could be either one where the fish are still down there at 60 feet. Nothing much has changed. Could be the first day, could be the second day. Usually by the 3rd day, you'll start seeing a little bit of high cirrus come, and you'll see the jet streams get a little bit longer, a little more drawn out, a little bit better. Where the fish, after the 3rd day, they move back to the sanctuary 30 to 35 feet. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will go to the end of the bar for about 5 or 10 minutes. And that's it. So that's what the fish do. I mean, it's pretty tough. If you're up there fishing 10 or 12 feet, and that's all the deeper you check, and the fish move up to the break line at 20 feet, stay there for 10 minutes, and go back down, there's no way you can get together. So you got to be prepared to control your depth as deep as you can. Now they're back to the sanctuary depth, 30, 35 feet. Just a side view.
Yeah, I have a question. If you got the watercolor like what his brother was doing that, compared to clear lake, will the color watercolor make the fish move longer, or will they move up quicker on your days after the run?
they won't be as deep, and when they do move, they're gonna come shallower than what they will on a clear lake.
Cause some of that last fire, those fish there, I mean, they drop off into that channel, they're down as deep where you can't go up there. There's logs and brush down there. And a home on a clear lake, even if they drop down to 50, and they're moving those, I mean, they'll come up somewhat and still pick them off 22 foot base of weed line or something.
Watercolor is always, the darker watercolor is always better to fish than the clear lakes. In any body of water, any condition, the darker water is always better.
So your movements will be longer.
They'll be longer, they'll be shallower, and everything is better. I mean, it's just that way. I mean, if you have a lake that's right next door that's clear and one that's dark, you better pick the dark one. The only way I wouldn't is if the dark one didn't have any northerns in it. If the clear one was full of northerns, sure, I'd fish with northerns. But you always should, if all things being equal on both lakes, you should always pick the dark one. That's a good guideline to go by.
I add something to that?
Go for it.
Well, like John's talking about it in the same area, and in our area, we have better luck. What John's trying to get at is our clear lakes are a lot deeper, far deeper, and our off-color lakes they might go down to 25 feet of zone. And we're having a problem where you've gone out day 3 and day 4 and doing real good on the clear stuff. And on the other lake, the fish haven't quite recuperated yet.
Well, that's,
So what I'm getting at, what does water depth play along with watercolor?
if you got a lake that's only 25 feet deep, it's probably not going to be a good lake to fish anyways. I wouldn't pick it to fish it to begin with, probably, if it's only 25 feet deep.
Even if it's good watercolor?
Even if it's good watercolor. I would prefer to have 40 or 50 foot, and then it would probably be a good lake because the fish can get away from the bad weather conditions.
And how come like the lake here in Michigan, that Hess Lake, we slaughter that 25 feet of water, we make it a point to go there to fish more than any place.
Hess Lake has a good population of fish, and it has good waterfront. It's better than Fremont. You would have to pick it. It's got northern pike in it. You would have to pick that lake over any lake around because of the fish it's got. You know, one of the things you do after a cold front, you got to pick a lake that's got a good population. You surely don't want to go to a lake that doesn't have a good population to begin with.
That's why it's so like,
So let's say as things get better, we start beginning to see some high cirrus clouds. The wind has dropped. The fish move up to the 15 to 20 foot break line for a little ways, a little bit of time. And then they go back down, and things get a little bit better, maybe the 4th day or 5th day, it doesn't matter. You see we got a lot of high cirrus. Fish gonna move up, let's say it's day 4, day 5, they're gonna move out of the sanctuary, gonna move up to the break line at 15 or 20 feet, pause a little bit, case the joint, move up to the 10 to 13 foot stump, case the joint, maybe move back down to the sanctuary. Things get better yet. I'm sure the morning's gonna be out tearing them up when it looks like that. We get a full movement of the fish. The big fish move up to the 10 to 13 foot break. The little ones, the stinkers, go into shallows. Now the guys, the tournament guys, are catching a couple fish, maybe a big one. But the Spoonplugger, he would have been into the fish a long time ago when they move up to the 15 or 20. He'd have probably been into the fish pretty good at that time. He's not going to wait for them to come up to 10 to 13 because he's going to be out there checking that 15 to 20 foot break line out anyways. And even if he fails there, he's going to go out there and check that little deep water sanctuary spot. You have to be prepared to fish that deep. Our guidelines say that when the fish are in the deep water sanctuary, it's going to be tough they're going to be tough to catch when they're down there because they're so deep and so dormant, they're almost impossible to catch. But there are times when they become active down there. Mr. Perry says that when they become active, they may move towards the shallows. He says that because sometimes they become active and they do not move towards the shallows. They become active in their sanctuary for a short time with no intentions of moving towards the shallows. When that happens, a lure presented at that depth in front of them is proper. You'll catch it. But our guidelines say we're going to have trouble. Sometimes we have to wait for the fish to become active and move up on the structure before we can catch them. The same thing here. When we had a full movement, the little ones are in the shallows, the big fish stopped at the 8 to 10 foot break line. It becomes known as a hot spot just because the structure situation leads the fish there for no other reason. We might make a comment here. These big fish from 2.5 pounds up to 5 3/4 pounds, when they move up to the 8 to 10 foot depth, they stop and pause. If there are any freaks, 6 3/4, 7 pounds or bigger, they're going to be somewhere in around that school from 2.5 to 5 3/4. Don't ever expect to go out and catch a school of 6 pounders because it just doesn't happen. 2.5 to 5 3/4 pounds, and there'll be a few freaks around. But you may check a little bit deeper. When you get done catching those 2.5 to 5 3/4 pounds, if you want to see if there's a monster around, you may check a little bit deeper. After it's over, they all go back downstairs, sanctuary depth. You wake up the next day, the front goes through, here you go, bright clear skies, now you got to start all over again. Now you got to wait 6 or 7 days or 5 days. So the whole thing is just the weather conditions. The fish move according to the weather conditions. They're completely controlled by it. How shallow they come, how long they stay is completely controlled by the weather and the water conditions at that particular time. Here they are back in China again. They're down there at 60 feet again. You might say something about the colder season. You want to fish the steeper drop-offs, the quicker drop-offs in the colder season. Before the spawn and late again in the fall, you want to fish the steeper stuff, the shorter structures. In the summer, you want to fish the longer, flatter features. There's your hand hole right there. The colder you fish the shorter side, it's shorter movement. The hotter you fish the longer side. It's just a basic guideline. Just a top view to give you a better idea. Here we have a cove out there, a feeder cut. On the left-hand side, you see the steep and deep bank up there? That drops right into the deepest water. The channel butts right up against there. And then you have they use that in the colder season during the spawning. They have that whole feeder creek there to go up into spawn. And on the right-hand side, you got a long flat bar that sticks way out. That'd be your summertime structure. So you have everything right there in a nutshell, right there in one spot. You have your cold, you have your spawning, and you have your summer structure all there in one spot. Very important points. Deep water is the home of the fish. They periodically become active and they may move towards the shallows. The movement is not haphazard, but on paths or migration routes. The routes are on structure. If you have no structure, you have no fish. When moving, they pause or stop at breaks on structure. Fish do not move constantly nor consistently. You have to exercise patience. They are controlled by the weather and the water conditions. When they say, Mr. Perry says, fish do not move constantly nor consistently, that is why we have to go through the process of our trolling, starting in the shallows and working all the way out as deep as the features go. When we get done, we have to go back and start all over again and work back out. That's because the fish do not move constantly nor consistently, and that is how we exercise patience. We do it constantly. We always have to check our depths and speeds constantly. What can I control to catch a fish? If you can't control something, there ain't no sense worrying about it. You have to be able to control it. This is pretty good. A seine, a gig, a gun, poison, dynamite, shocking, or draining.
We gotta go in front of
That's a Savorni technique. Which works good, though, John.
Oh, yeah. It's expensive, though.
These are the controls we have to worry about. Depth, speed, size, color, and action. There's too many combinations. It's too much trouble. We got to get rid of some of them. We're going to have some tools to do so we can control some of those things. So we can control the depth, speed, size, color, and action. We got to have some tools to do the job. And Mr. Perry offers them. I think he says basically you can take them or leave them, but I've never seen anything do a better job, better than Buck's tools. How do you classify lures? Why do you buy a particular one? You know, you should only think of it as one thing. How can I use that lure to control my depth and my speed? That's the only thing you should ever be thinking of. Here we got too many combinations. We got to get rid of some. That's easy. We're going to get rid of action first. We have small and large actions. We have tight wobbles. We have wide wobbles. But you control that with your speed. A slow speed gives a wider wobble. A faster speed gives a tighter wobble. So you're going to control the action of your lure with the speed. So we're not going to worry about action too much. And then Buck puts on there plus the walk. A walk, the lure bump in the bottom, will give you a completely different type of speed control than you get from any lure running free. It's very, very important in deep water that you'll find out later in your studies. You've got to walk the bottom deeper than 8 to 10 feet. So you have small and large, consider that as speed, plus the walk, then you have control. We're going to get rid of color real quick too. Has some lights, some darks, some neutrals. Treat it as an aid and that's it. Doesn't matter what colors you have. A neutral is a brass, polished brass, or yellows. You got to have some light ones and some dark ones. Mr. Perry said, if in doubt, try a polished brass. He has another guideline. If you have a favorite color, use it. Then you have control. So get rid of that real quick. Got to get rid of size also. We use small and large sizes, and we use them for one reason, and that's control the depth. Very simple. That's the only reason. Even a jump type lures. When we fish shallower, we're going to use the smaller, lighter. When we fish deeper, we're going to use the heavier ones. It gives you better control. So we're going to get rid of that. So that leaves us nothing but depth and speed. So we talk about speed. Who can say? The temperature is your basic guideline. You got to check it out constantly. In the colder part of the season, slower. In the warmer part of the season, warmer water, faster. But you still have to check it out. It could be the colder part of the season, and your speed could still be real fast. You have to check it out. It changes every day.
John, when Buck says when you're walking bottom, just slow right down. You're walking bottom slow. But when you're checking out speed and that, when you're walking bottom a lot and you're full foot, should you speed up and go slow when you're walking, or just stay slow?
I would check it out. I mean, you have to just check it out. Some days the fish want the lure walking. Some days they want it just off the line. So you got to check it out. When you're fishing for northerns and it's real hot and your speed is 8, 9, 10 mile an hour, you're going to have a hard time bumping the bottom. You might be able to tick it if you get your line length just right. But when the northerns are moving, you don't want to slow down. You want to catch as many as you can. So you really, those fish you don't have to walk too much to make them take. You know that. You just have to check it out. That's why Buck says when you control the shallows, you move in until your lure bumps, and then you move out till it runs free. So you're checking the bumping, and you're checking the running free. You ever notice that sometimes the fish will take when you're bumping, and sometimes they'll take just as you come on? And that changes every day. So you just have to check it out. Depth, who can say about that? You gotta check it out constantly. Don't fish where they ain't. There's not much that can be said about that. You have to check it out constantly. Your depth and your speeds. Let's talk about presentation of lures a little bit. We're going to do it two ways, trolling and casting. A lot of spoon pluggers do not cast. Did Frank leave? He's asleep. You may be missing the best fishing of your whole life. If you hit a 4-pound bass and you don't stop and cast, you may be missing the best school of fish that you ever seen in your whole life.
But if you got Maryland Roller, why would you eat Louis' tail already?
I wouldn't. So we're going to do it both trolling and casting. Our trolling, let me back up, our trolling is our teacher. Absolutely, you can't learn a lake by casting alone. There's no way. A lot of people frown on trolling, and you just don't worry about that. You take care of yourself. But trolling is our teacher. Trolling will tell you where to cast. It'll tell you when to cast. It'll tell you what to cast. We're going to use these tools. These are the best tools to control our depth and speed that I've ever seen. There's none out there that even comes close to it. I think most of you guys already know that. I would hate to see the day that these tools aren't available, because I don't know what, we'd find something, but right now it's Mr. Perry gives us these tools, and we should use them to their fullest extent, because nothing else out there does as good a job. We're going to start with a 500 if at all possible, and we're going to cover a pretty good section of shoreline, starting from 2 to 4 feet deep. 500 runs 2 to 4 feet deep. So we're going to start on the left-hand side there, and we're going to go down that shoreline. We're going to let out a couple of colors, 20 yards. We're going to move in towards the shoreline until our lure starts bumping or starts hitting weeds, or you can see the bottom in 2 to 4 foot, but we're going to move in until the lure starts bumping a little bit. And then we're going to move out ever so gradually, just a few degrees, until the lure runs free. And then we're going to move in until it bumps. Then we're going to move out until it runs free. We're going to do that the whole length of this shoreline. What that'll do for us is that's going to contour the bottom for us. We're going to feel our way along there. By the time we get done, that might be a mile or more. We're going to know the shape of that bottom. If we catch a fish anywhere along there, it's going to be easy to stop the boat and cast free running lures and jump type lures to check at any time to see if any other fish are around. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to start with a 500. We're going to contour troll the whole section of shoreline. We're going to find out what's there. The whole time we're doing it, we're going to be watching the shoreline. We're going to keep our eyes open. We're going to want to know exactly where we are at all times. We don't want to get lost. If we don't catch a fish, we have to figure that they're not there. The next step is start with a 400, which runs 4 to 6 feet deep. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to move in till the lure bumps, and we're going to gradually move out till it runs free. This is going to contour the whole bottom. It's going to show us what's there. We're going to check our speeds while we're doing it. We're going to go fast. We're going to go slow. We're going to go medium. We have to find out what the fish want for speeds. It's going to take care of the mood of the fish. If we don't catch anything on that pass, we're going to have to figure they're not there. We're going to go to a 250, which is get us down about 9 feet. We're going to do the exact same thing. You can see that it's showing up on the right-hand upper. You're going to show a big bar exists. When you come out off the end of that bar, when your lure comes free, you're going to find out you're going to have to make a pretty good 90 to get back before your lure starts bumping. So that's going to tell you there's something exists out there. It's changed. Something changed out there. So now we've got down to the 250 about 9 feet, and this is what we found. We got a bar. We got a ridge-like bar running out all the way to deep water, so we know that the fish will probably use it. Let's back up. We've covered down to about 9 feet. Now this is where things change. When the big fish come up to 8 to 10 feet, they're going to stop. Instead of covering big areas in the shallows, now we're going to concentrate in smaller areas where the fish use the structure situations. This is what we covered so far. This is what we found. Our next step is with a 200. Now, instead of contouring and everything, we're going to make straight line passes on this bar. The main thing is that we cover this bar in as many places as we possibly can, many different directions. They may not, all our passes are not going to be straight like that. They'll be down the sides and run off the tip. They're going to be down, come straight in off the bar and run down the sides. The most important thing is just to cover the whole bar as deep as we can get with that 200, which would take us down to about 12 feet. Once we've done that and we haven't caught a fish, we just have to figure that they're not there yet. We have to exercise patience. Now we're down to a 100. We do the exact same thing. We cover it down to the depth of 15 feet or as deep as we can walk our lure. Our first few passes might be with 2 or 3 colors. In our final passes, we might want to let out 1 or 2 more colors on our final passes to get us as deep as we can go. Straight line passes, if at all possible. We walk across that bar. As soon as you feel the lure come off, you're going to turn around, go right back. Walk across it again. The lure's going to bump across the bar. You're going to turn, as soon as you feel it come off, you're going to turn around, you're going to go right back. But it's important just to cover it as deep as you can in as many different angles and directions. Just cover it. Walk all over that thing. So here's what we've done so far.
Excuse me, John. Don't you add, like when you get down to 8, 10 feet, go mark or anything of that bar so you got something to look at?
Yeah, you could do that. You could use shoreline sightings or marker buoys to keep you from getting lost. That's a good point, John. What we've done, we've covered it down to about 9 feet, and you can see the vertical there. We've covered the shallows all the way down to the bottom. By moving in and out, we've run free. When we get down to a 200, we concentrate on the bottom. That's what the line indicates down there. Now we're fishing the bottom. The fish use the bottom as their guideline to the shallows. So we have to use it also in our fishing. And we do the same thing on the steep shore. We get our lures in as close as possible. Here's a tall weed line. We stack our lures up along the weed line at different depths. Then when we get to the base of the weed line, now we fish the bottom. Same way on the other side, we get our lures as close as we possibly can. So if we haven't caught any fish, then we're going to have to go deeper with wire line and or anchoring with jump type lures, one or the other. This is your basic guideline stuff. This will keep you out of trouble. Trouble begins here. Below 15 feet, I don't know if it is a mechanical problem and a psychological problem, but most people start having trouble below 15 feet. Let's say on our final pass with a 100, we caught a big fish. We throw a marker buoy out to make sure we know where we are. We might make one more trolling pass to verify where we hit the fish at. But the first thing we want to do is go to the cast immediately. Too much time is wasted by making another trolling pass. You want to immediately go to the cast. If you can anchor the boat shallower than 8 to 10 feet, that's what you want to do, and still reach the fish. That's the ideal casting position. You want to cast just slightly past the fish. Let the lure sink to the bottom on a tight line and make a fast, steady retrieve through the fish. This is what it's all about right here. This is what all spoon pluggers need to get into to understand what can be done. There are schools of fish out there that can be caught with every cast like that. I don't think we have to say much about that. Once a spot is found, you can do a pretty good job by casting alone. We know that this is a structured situation and the fish do use it. So now we can just anchor on it, fan cast to shallows, with 2-type lures, fan casted deep with 2-type lures, jump types and spoon plugs, bottom level. We can do a pretty good job by casting alone then. Casting and trolling, basic rules, less than 8 to 10 feet. The shallows, work all sections and follow contours. More than 8 to 10 feet deep, we need to work on the bottom and keep our passes straight. Each lure in position in both zones. Fairly simple. This is a Spoonplugger's basic guideline. The bottom part there sums everything up. Everything there is about spoon plugging, it sums it up. If you and I desire to consistently catch fish whenever or wherever we go fishing, we must control the depth and speed of our lures on and or around the bottom features, structure breaks and break lines the fish are using in their movements and migrations. That sums up everything there is about spoon plugging. Right there. We're almost done. We had to put a few pictures in here to prove that somebody catches a few fish. That's Bill Bagshaw on an outing in Monroe last year. That's my wife out here at Watts Bar last year. I don't know who that is. That's my wife again. That's in Long Lake in Michigan. You know what's that? That's Ted and the wife and I on Mona Lake. Jerry, the wife again, she does catch all the fish, by the way. That's why she's not here now. I ain't bringing her no more. Spoon plugs catch all kinds of fish. Sheephead, they're fun. Smallmouth. There's a group of fellas. You ever seen them before? At one of the Muskegon outings. We had a good time on that outing. You know him? We hit 3 muskies like that in 3 passes on a lake in Michigan.
He cleaned up real well.
That was a fish we got off of Watts Bar last year on the way home, Frank. See that house in the background? That's why I took the picture like that. I wanted you to see it. That's Hamilton Lake in the late fall. In November and December, we fish jump type lures. Real cold. I mean, I think you can see some snow up there on the bank. You want to catch fish, you want to learn how to catch fish, you got to fish for all species, you got to fish all seasons, all year round. Fish every chance you get. That look familiar, Frank, the background? Right across from the power plant? Down here, the nuclear?
Oh, is that right? Is that a bag? Is that a largemouth?
Yeah.
He hasn't had anything to eat.
No, they all were like that. That's on Mona Lake. That was a school of smallmouth me and my father-in-law hit. 2 days before we got them on Mona Lake. We was into the smallmouth for 15 minutes straight, as fast as you could reel in. You throw it out and it sink to the bottom and you crank it just as fast as you could. For 15 minutes straight, we had a fish on every cast. That was a ball. That's a 7-pounder I got last fall. I cleaned up pretty good too, don't I, Frank? That was on Thanksgiving Day. There's a group we got out of a lake that, I'm telling you, nobody fishes it. It's 3 small natural lakes when they flooded this small reservoir. And they flooded these 3 natural lakes. And everybody fishes the weeds, and there's 3 deep holes that nobody even fishes. Nobody even gets in your way. And it's full of northerns and bass.
How deep are they, John?
What?
How deep are those 3 that you...
2 holes are 22 foot, 1 is about 32 foot. That's Jim Binninger and I made that catch on Hess Lake the day after we caught him. I took Jim over there and showed him where the spot was. And there's a Hess Lake catch. There's a smallmouth from Mona. That was a nice one. Look at that fat guy. He ain't here.
He's sunburned belly.
Is that Thanksgiving Day too?
No. I think that was Wawasee. Got to get the kids in there. Those are the ones we got to get to spoon plugging. So
You
spoon.
know, Jim is a nickname Poindexter, don't you? Hey?
I know that kid caught some of them that day. This stuff here, as you study your home study courses and stuff, you'll learn about this stuff as you go on in your studies. It's all very, very important to becoming a better spoon plugger. It's all offered in the home study course in the Green Book and the National Spoon Plugger. I will say one thing about this is just a repeat here. I will add one thing. The number of bushes, standing trees, weeds, or flats that exist in a body of water does not change a thing. That's important. So we're finished. I want to say that the National Spoon Plugger Organization, without them, I don't think I'd be where I am, and I don't think anybody would be where they are without these good bunch of people around here, without the national organization. And Frank does a heck of a job with the newsletter. He does a heck of a job with everything. Thanks, Frank.
John?